Three fears shaped more of my life than I wanted to admit. The fear of not being good enough to be loved, the fear that I couldn't trust myself to follow through, and the fear if I put myself out there that people would realize that I don't have anything valuable to say. Facing those fears changed my life directly, not perfectly, not instantly, but in a very real way. And I think most people aren't stuck because they don't know what they want. They're stuck because underneath there's a fear that they haven't fully faced yet. By the end of this video, my hope is that you'll be able to know how to look beneath the surface of the problem, name the fear that's underneath that, and choose one brave action that begins to create real change in your life. So I want to walk you through the three fears that I faced, what I did about them, and what changed because of it. Real change happens when you stop managing around the surface of the problem and face the fear that's underneath it. These stories are not about becoming fearless. Far from it. They're about identifying the fear, facing it directly, and building a life that's no longer organized around avoiding. First story is about the fear of not being good enough to be loved. In middle school and high school, I was kind of the kid that faded away. I wasn't really charismatic. I was pretty introverted. I only had a few friends and just didn't really put myself out there. I was kind of a nerdy band kid and just kept to myself, did my own things, and wasn't really part of the in crowd, if you will. Did a lot of hiding in middle school and high school. I dated later than many of my peers and just had trouble finding myself. And part of my story is that I fell in love with this girl in 5th grade. I saw her, I think it was on the bus, if I remember right. We were actually neighbors back then. And she was it for me. I could just tell that there was something about her and never did anything about it because she was way out of my league, if you will. And the story continues that when I was 18 years old, I was driving home and I really don't know what came over me, but I decided I was going to drive on over and pull into her driveway and knock on the door and say hi. I think a little bit out of it. I was terrified and not even sure how I got myself to drive into the driveway and knock on the door, but I did. And she came to the door and was, I think, just as stunned as I was that I was standing at her doorway. And I don't even remember exactly what I said, but hi. And we talked for a bit, and then I went on my way. And a little bit later, we ended up actually dating for a little bit of time. And it was just something I never thought would happen to me. Life happens, and we didn't stay together, but fast forward into my 40s now, and we actually got back together and are now married. And it's the most amazing relationship I have ever been in, ever will be in. She is it. She is my everything. And it's just proof of what can happen when you face those fears. I put myself out there. I still don't know how I did it, but it absolutely changed my life. It took a while, took a long while, but it did change my life. Sometimes bravery is about taking that chance and letting yourself be chosen and not find all the reasons why you shouldn't be. And that was really the start of understanding that pattern. Fear doesn't always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like hesitation. Sometimes it looks like being realistic. Sometimes it looks like waiting until you feel more confident. But underneath it all, there's one question that we're afraid to find out the answer. And for me, the next question was simple. Can I actually trust myself to do hard things? So my second fear was fear of not being self-disciplined enough. I spent much of my life struggling with discipline. I have ADHD, have a hard time focusing, and never really did great at school or in sports or really in anything in my life. Part of it was focus and ADHD and not really being able to stay with one thing. But the other part of it was a fear of not being able to do it. In school, I didn't push myself or try to get good grades. I hardly did homework. I never really tested myself to see if I could really do it. I was the same way in sports. I was a swimmer in high school and I did okay, enough to be there and participate and do some races, but never really excelled. But part of that was the fear of not being strong enough, not being able to push myself enough to build what I needed to succeed. One of the ways that I really struggled with self-discipline was in my eating habits and exercise habits. I, quite frankly, ate really poorly and hardly ever exercised for much of my 20s, even into 30s, and just had this storyline again that I couldn't do it. And I tried different times throughout the years, different diets, different exercises, would sign up for the gym and do that, but never really stuck to anything. And I had always had this kind of idea or dream in the back of my head of trying to do a triathlon, because I thought in order to do one of those, you have to be a little disciplined and you have to be able to do 3 sports. I just admired people that were able to do that. Never did it. Signed up once back in my 30s, but never even trained, didn't go to the race. But about 5 years ago, my brother-in-law actually talked me into doing a triathlon for the first time. And so I trained and was actually able to do my first ever triathlon. It was quite the experience and made me feel like maybe I could do this. I thought about my experience from the past of taking a leap, doing something really brave, and how that impacted my life. So with my brother-in-law's push, I ended up deciding to train for an Ironman. And if you don't know what an Ironman is, that's a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike, and a marathon at the end. It's big. And so I thought, this is my chance to prove to myself that I can do it. I can be self-disciplined and I can succeed. So I spent a year training for this Ironman, and about 3 years ago was able to actually complete it. It took me 15 hours and 46 minutes or so to get it done, but I finished. And that experience has increased my self-confidence and belief in my ability to be disciplined, and has had trickling effects throughout my life since then. That experience with discipline changed me because it gave me the ability to trust in myself again. It taught me that self-trust isn't something that you wait to feel. It's something you build with repeated practice and effort. But there was one more fear that I still hadn't faced. And honestly, this is the one that I'm still practicing right now. The fear of being seen. The fear that if I put my work, my voice, my ideas out there, that people will realize that I'm not smart enough, or not interesting enough, or I don't really have anything valuable to say. And if I'm being honest with myself, this is the fear that's the most terrifying to me. I've never been, like I said, the most charismatic. I'm not the best with words. I'm a guy that kind of fumbles over my words, can't think of what to say. And my introversion just really comes out when I'm in groups. Oftentimes I freeze up if I have to present, and I often do a lot more listening than I do talking. And fortunately or unfortunately, my career really hasn't helped with this either. I've been a therapist for almost 18 years. When you get me in a room with 1 or 2 people, I'm usually pretty good, especially if much of my job is listening. I'm much more comfortable offering my ideas, thoughts, and perspectives from experience of 18 years in the field when it's 1 or 2 people, when it's an intimate setting and not a big group setting. I've often heard in my career that we want to hear your voice more. You have good ideas and perspective, and we want to hear it. But if you remember from earlier part of my story, is I had spent years building up this negative self-talk about not being good enough, not being smart enough, and really supporting that idea through years of avoidance. And over the last 2 or 3 years, I've had this dream of building Explore Bravely and really having impact on people's lives and helping them practice bravery. But in order to do that, I knew I was going to have to put my voice out there. And if you've been paying attention, you're starting to learn that I tend to like the big leaps. And so what better way of taking a big leap in terms of putting your voice out there than starting a YouTube channel? So far, I've published 10 long form videos. This will be my 11th, and each one has been absolutely terrifying. But there's a voice in the back of my head that keeps telling me, you've been here before. You know what this practice does. Keep going. The lesson I've learned is the only way to become someone who has something valuable to say is to say the honest thing out loud and let it be seen. The question isn't, what do I want? The deeper question is, What fear have I built my life around avoiding? Because once you name the fear, you can stop fighting the surface level problem and start practicing the brave action that's actually going to change you. If this connects with you, I'd love for you to drop a comment of the one fear you're going to stop organizing your life around. And if you're doing this kind of work or want to start doing this work in your life, please subscribe. This channel is about facing what we avoid, building emotional resilience, and doing the brave work that creates real change. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.